Hello everyone and welcome to this week's episode of White Wanderer. I'm Jack and today you join me in my rather windswept hometown of Ryde, the second most populous town on the island and the Isle of Wight's primary transport interchange. Now back in the spring I took a look at the rather confusing early evolution of Ryde's rail system, primarily the 16-year-long struggle between the Isle of Wight Railway and some stubborn local landowners who refused point blank to allow the railway to extend beyond St John's over their patch to Ryde Esplanade, which was, and of course still is, the gateway to tourist traffic on and off the island. Now, in the previous episode I explained how this extensive confrontation impacted upon the Isle of Wight Railway, almost running the company into the ground before it even got going. The balmy was so bad that the railway had to scrap their original plans for a terminus in Ryde. This original terminus was Melville Street, and it was included in the railway's bill passed in 1860. But one big hullabaloo later, when the railway actually opened in 1864, Melville Street Station was nowhere to be seen. The company were forced to compromise, and instead terminate their services a kilometre south, at St John's on the outskirts of town. And there they remained, stuck fast for a good decade and a half. Melville Street then would become Ryde's Ghost Station, a terminus outlined but never built. But of course the railway would reach this point in 1880 as it tunnelled under the streets to the Esplanade, and they achieved this with a little help from their friends. Now, I've already covered this in the previous video, so I'm not going to repeat myself too much, but one interesting factoid which I missed out is that Ryde actually had a second ghost station. The date is 1871. And at this moment in time there existed two railways in the area. The Isle of Wight Railway, disgruntled and languishing at St John's, and the Ryde Pier Tramway. The tramway opened in 1864, the same year as the railway. But by 1871, with the drastic increase in holiday traffic to the island, the gap between the Esplanade and St John's, devoid of any transport system, was becoming a major burden. To bridge the gap, the tramway was extended in September of that year. A spur heading east away from the foot of the pier and crossing the Esplanade, before passing over what was then the edge of the quay. It then continued along the front to avoid the area of land-related confrontations around Melville Street, stretching through the site of where Peter Pan's play park now sits. It was at this point that the tramway curved sharply to the south, crossing the road and passing through that building over there. Yes, through the building. It then paralleled Cornwall Street as it entered the area of what is now Monkton Mead Close. Beyond that, the tramway actually joins the future alignment of the railway just north of Rink Road. And it is this area around Monkton Mead Close that we are interested in today. Not Monkton Mead Close, you fool. Merry Mead Close. Honestly, me with names. Anyway, this is the location of interest. See, when the tramway opens, this was the site of a crossover point, a loop to allow trams, which were then horse-drawn, to pass each other. But later on, it would actually become something else more significant. It's at this point I have to make an admission. You see, by my own definition, a ghost station is a station which was planned but never built. And of course, Melville Street would fall within this definition. But what we have here is actually something completely different, because this station was actually built. It existed for a very short amount of time. Platforms and all.
That's right. This unsuspecting cul-de-sac was once the site of our lost station. But how did it happen and where did it go? Well, to answer that, we have to return to the tramway and its alignment to St John's. Heading south away from Simeon Street and Merrymead Close, the tram track joins the alignment of the later extension, crossing Rink Road and Park Road initially via a level crossing. And here's where it gets interesting, hopefully. See, the tram stop was located on the north side of St John's Road, and the bridge, which is here today, didn't exist until the later extension in 1880. But by 1871, the Isle of Wight Railway had actually already managed to cross the road, to allow the runaround loop at St John's Station to be expanded. And it resulted in the locomotives passing over the crossing light engine before returning on the loop line and running around their train. So why is this actually important? Well, essentially this runaround loop was actually connected to the tramway extension. And more importantly, both railway and tramway were of the same gauge.
Strictly speaking then, a line actually ran between St John's and Pier Head uninterrupted in as early as 1871. But crucially, the railway couldn't use it. They didn't have the running powers to do so, and even if they did, the tramway wasn't built to a high enough standard to support the weight of a locomotive. This though would all change in 1875 when a new company would enter Ryde's transport landscape, and this company was the Ryde and Newport Railway.
The Ryde and Newport Railway was proposed in 1872 and for the most part was constructed astonishingly quickly. It took only 3 years to build, opened between Ryde and the county town of Newport in 1875. The R&R though, being swift and ambitious, didn't want to stop there. Upon reaching St John's, where the Isle of Wight Railway had been stuck for 11 years, the R&R didn't take kindly to the prospect of just sitting around waiting for permissions and stuff. They saw the tramway ahead of them and they saw a plan. The chairman of the Ryde and Newport Railway was a Mr. George Young, known for his ability to get things done, sometimes slightly shrewdly. Mr. Young, upon submitting the bill for his railway, included a clause to allow light steam locomotives to be used exclusively on the section of tramway along the Esplanade. This clause passed through the court relatively unnoticed, but what Mr. Young had not disclosed was that to reach the dock he intended to run said locomotives up the tramway from St John's. However, there were a few logistical issues that Young couldn't ignore.
The curve here at the east end of the Esplanade was way too tight for any passenger rolling stock. And then of course there was the building over there. Good luck trying to get a full-size steam locomotive through that. But how about south of the building? How about the area of Simeon Street?
The passing loop here on the site of what is now Merrymead Close was seen as a perfect location for a station. Closer to the seafront than St John's, if not a little cramped. Young figured if he could get away with running engines on the tramway around the docks, he could probably get away with running a passenger service, let's say unofficially, to the site here opposite Simeon Street. Plans were drawn up for a double-platformed halt, wooden in construction. And thanks to a bit of I'll pay you to look away, the station was completed. But there was a problem. See, despite their best efforts, the platforms weren't actually fit to accommodate passengers until early 1876. And by that time the Ryde and Newport Railway had already completed their line into St John's. This gap in time allowed the inspectors to have a bit of a nosy round at what was going on, and well, they weren't all that pleased.
Apparently, on arrival, they were absolutely staggered that the project had been given the green light. Clearly, the track work was only suitable as a tramway, and on top of that, no thought had been given by the company as to how exactly they were meant to operate full-sized passenger trains alongside horse-drawn trams. The whole thing was a complete farce. The clause in the bill was retracted, and Simeon Street Station never saw a train.
Or did it? In March 1878, the press reported complaints from locals claiming that a Ryde and Newport Railway locomotive had made its way up the tramway to the station, seemingly with a goods train of coal. Now, of course, this could just be a mistake, but there were other reports as well. Stories of residents on Simeon Street being woken up in the early hours by an engine whistle coming from just outside their bedroom window. However, we cannot know for certain, but one thing is for sure though, Simeon Street Station wasn't around for long.
In 1880, the railway was extended through the tunnel under the street to the Esplanade and of course on to Pier Head. And in that same year, the tramway disappeared along with Simeon Street Station. But crucially, it was there, and who knows, under the cover of darkness, it may have even seen a train or two. Before I go then, I just want to say a massive thank you to all of you, because very recently we reached a big milestone. We hit 5,000 subscribers on the channel, and that is huge for us. We never thought we'd get to this point, and it is certainly worth me getting rained on like I am now. It's just started raining. If you'd like to support the channel, then you can always do by joining our members club for $1.99 a month, and with that you get access to extra videos and extra perks as well. But for now, I'm going to leave you because I'm going to get drenched in a minute. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again next week. Bye bye.